A fateful encounter. The sky was a pale, late-afternoon hue, tinged with a melancholy orange that dissolved into the grayish blue of scattered clouds. The hot asphalt reflected the headlights of cars as the city pulsed around him, indifferent to the restlessness that was consuming Aaron. He was stuck in traffic, one hand on the steering wheel, the other impatiently tapping his fingers against his leg. The day had been long, exhausting, an habitual fatigue, an invisible weight, pressed on his chest, a weight he no longer even tried to name. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen. The traffic light turned red. He sighed and glanced toward the sidewalk. It was a second, maybe less. A moment of distraction that froze everything around him. A few feet away, a woman stood near a bench holding a child's hand. Aaron's heart gave a strange, uncomfortable leap. Something about her seemed painfully familiar. The curve of her shoulders, the way she tilted her head when speaking to the boy. His breath hitched. Then, she turned. The shock was instantaneous, as if someone had ripped the ground from beneath his feet. Vivian? The name echoed in his mind like a sharp memory, piercing his consciousness with cruel precision. She was there, in the flesh, after years, after all that time. Aaron felt his chest tighten, a suffocating heat rising in his throat. His eyes, however, didn't linger on her for long. The boy. The boy had straight dark hair just like his, a tan complexion, a slightly rounded nose, and a look of concentration as he played with something in his hands. But it was the eyes that hit him with force. Deep, bright brown, full of curiosity and innocence. Eyes that Aaron knew too well. His own eyes. His blood ran cold. Time lost its shape. A wave of adrenaline rushed down his spine, making his skin feel cold and his mouth dry. He didn't think. He didn't reason. The light turned green, but he didn't see it. He heard horns blaring in the distance, an irritated driver yelling something, but the world had already faded out around him. Without hesitation, he opened the car door and got out. His heart was pounding, a frantic, mismatched drum inside his chest. Each step toward her felt surreal, as if he were walking through a confusing dream, a time warp that flung him into a past he thought he had buried. When he was close enough for her to notice him, Vivian looked up, and their eyes met. It was an invisible blow. Her face hardened instantly. What were once delicate features were now etched by time, by experience, and above all, by something he had never seen in her before, a coldness, a sharp coldness, like a newly honed blade. Aaron stopped a few steps away, unable to look away. "Vivian, is that you?" His voice came out raspier than he expected, loaded with disbelief. She blinked, surprised, but she quickly composed herself. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was firm, controlled, but he noticed the slight tremor in the hand that adjusted the boy's backpack. Aaron didn't respond. His mind was fixated on the boy, on the absurd detail of that similarity. A screaming truth that was impossible to ignore. His chest rose and fell heavily. He felt the words slip from his lips before he could stop them. "Is that boy? Is he my son?" The silence that followed was deafening. Vivian hardened even more. The air around them seemed to grow heavy. The boy, oblivious to the adult tension, continued playing, unaware that something had changed in the atmosphere. She took a deep breath, her eyes shining with a mix of emotions that Aaron couldn't fully decipher. Hurt, perhaps, resentment, and something deeper that she seemed determined to hide. "Does that matter now, Aaron?" The words were like a slap. His chest contracted in response. Every fiber of his being said yes. What could possibly matter more than anything else? But looking at her, seeing how her body remained rigid, as if she were ready to defend herself from any attack. He knew this wouldn't be easy, and maybe, just maybe, he had no right to ask. The weight of the past. Aaron remained there, standing still, unable to react, while Vivian looked away and pulled the boy closer to her. The world around them continued at its normal pace, cars passing, people talking in the distance, life going on without realizing that, for him, everything had just fallen apart. The question still hung between them, but the absence of an answer was already enough of a response. The boy was his son. His body tensed, his muscles contracting from the impact of the silent revelation. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words were stuck in his throat. Vivian looked at him coldly, but there was something more behind that rigid facade. A shadow in her eyes, a remnant of the past he himself had destroyed. She sighed, as if carrying an unbearable weight, and then she turned. "Come on, honey," she said, her voice firm but contained. The boy looked at her and then at Aaron, with the innocent curiosity of a child who still didn't understand the meaning of that silent exchange. Vivian pulled him gently, and Aaron just watched, unable to move. His eyes were glued to the silhouette of the two of them walking away, the image blurred by a whirlwind of emotions he couldn't name. He wanted to run after her. He wanted to demand explanations, but something inside him whispered that it was already too late. When he could finally move, his legs felt shaky. He got into the car and closed the door hard, trying to catch his breath. But it was no use. Reality had hit him with brutal force. The impact of the past came back with all its might. That night, he couldn't sleep. His eyes remained fixed on the dark ceiling of the room, while his mind spun out of control. The boy's face was etched into his memory in every small detail. The similarities were undeniable, but it wasn't just that tormented him. It was the possibility of having made an irreversible mistake. What if he had believed a lie? He closed his eyes, but the images came anyway. The past dragged him in, pulling him back without mercy. The day everything fell apart came back like a cruel sequence of flashes. He remembered perfectly the feeling of the rough paper between his sweaty fingers, the anonymous file left in an unaddressed envelope on his desk. He remembered how his chest tightened when he saw the photos, the messages, the proof that Vivian was betraying him. The words were there, cold and objective, detailing meetings, describing supposed moments he never witnessed, but which, the instant he saw them, he believed without question. The air vanished from his lungs that night. The pain was instantaneous, a deep, throbbing cut in his flesh. He remembered the hatred, the betrayal burning in his stomach. And above all, he remembered how he didn't think. He didn't look for Vivian. He didn't ask for explanations. He just let the pain speak louder. The anger mixed with bruised pride made him make the most cowardly decision of his life, to leave without looking back. He vividly remembered the moment he packed his things messily, throwing clothes into the suitcase as if he were fleeing a fire, his heart racing, his mind clouded by resentment, the incessant buzzing of his phone, Vivian's name flashing on the screen. He ignored it. Then he blocked the number. Now, lying in the darkness, he felt guilt rooting itself inside him, like a living, suffocating thing. If that boy was his son, and every instinct inside him said yes, Vivian had been left alone. She went through everything without him. The pregnancy, the birth, the first years. Every moment that should have been shared, he had lost. Aaron squeezed his eyes shut, a bitter taste rising in his throat. He didn't want to remember Vivian's face when she saw him in that square. but it was impossible to forget. She didn't look at him with surprise or nostalgia, not even with anger. What he saw was much worse: indifference. She had moved on. And him? He was just a ghost haunting a past that no longer had room for him. A vicious revelation. His phone vibrated on the nightstand, pulling him from his suffocating thoughts. He picked up the device listlessly, seeing Maya's name flashing on the screen. For a moment, he hesitated, but he answered. "Aaron," her voice came through soft, loaded with rehearsed concern. "Are you okay?" He ran a hand over his face, exhausted. "I don't know," he replied honestly. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. "Does it have to do with Vivian?" Aaron closed his eyes, feeling the tension spread in his shoulders. "I saw her today." Maya sighed, a sound that seemed full of meaning. "And?" He hesitated. "She has a son, a little boy. He's 4 years old." Another silence, then a slightly altered tone. "Are you sure he's yours?" The voice continued, controlled, but full of innuendo. "She never looked for you all this time? If he were really your son, why didn't she tell you before?" He didn't know what to say. "Aaron!" Her voice softened even more, sweet and poisonous at the same time. "What if she's lying? I just think it's weird. I mean, why now? You've moved on. You have your career, your life, and all of a sudden, she shows up with a child?" Aaron remained silent, a knot forming in his throat. Why, deep down, was the doubt there? What if Vivian really was lying? But then another question came like a sharp blow. What if he had made the worst mistake of his life? The days that followed were a blur for Aaron. He tried to stick to his routine, but it was useless. The thought gnawed at him from the inside like a silent poison. He could barely eat, sleeping was a torment, and the boy's face, his son's, seemed to haunt him every moment. But it was Vivian's expression that really tormented him. That coldness, the hardness in her voice, the contained contempt. He threw himself into work, seeking distraction, but not even the chaos of contracts and meetings could distract him from the growing unease. Then, when his phone vibrated with an unknown notification, he almost ignored it. But fate was unforgiving. Aaron picked up the phone and unlocked the screen. His eyes scanned the words, and as he read, he felt the air escape from his lungs. The message was short, direct. Find out the truth before it's too late. Below, attached images. His heart raced. His hands trembled as he touched the screen, zooming in on the images. It was a conversation between Maya and a man named Marcus. He read it once, twice, 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. His blood ran cold in his veins. "If he finds out you set up the whole thing, you're screwed. Don't be an idiot. He'll never know. I made it look like the bitch betrayed him. And it worked, didn't it? Do you think he'll never connect the dots? Aaron always trusted me. He would never question it. And now he's gone. Exactly as he should be." The phone slipped from his hands and fell onto the table with a dull thud. Maya. The only person he trusted after Vivian. The person who, for years, had whispered in his ear, feeding his pain, telling him he had done the right thing by leaving. She destroyed his life. Aaron felt the bitter taste of anger rising in his throat. His entire body tensed. A suffocating heat rose from his stomach to his head, the kind of raw fury he had never experienced before. He didn't think. He didn't reason. He just grabbed his keys and left. Maya's house was a reflection of its owner, impeccable on the outside, rotten on the inside. Aaron took the steps 2 at a time, his chest heaving, and he pounded on the door. Nothing. He pounded again, harder. The doorknob turned. Maya appeared in the doorway, her hair in a messy bun, wearing a satin robe. Her eyes widened at the sight of him. but she quickly forced a surprised smile. "Aaron, what's wrong?" He didn't answer. He just walked in. She took a step back, hesitant. "What are you doing here?" Aaron didn't blink. His gaze burned with hatred as he threw the phone onto the glass table. "It was you, wasn't it?" Maya blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," he exploded, his voice echoing in the room. He walked forward, picked up the images, and threw them onto the table. "This, Maya, you destroyed my life." She paled. For an instant, the air seemed to empty from the room. "Aaron," her voice wavered, "you need to listen to me." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Listen, I should have done that with Vivian, shouldn't I? But you didn't allow it. You made sure of it." She swallowed. "I did it for you." "For me?" He took another step forward. "You ruined my life. Her life. You kept me from my own son." Maya trembled. I just wanted to protect you." Aaron looked at her with disgust. "You wanted to have me." The truth hung between them like a blade ready to cut. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, he didn't fall for the trap. "You never meant anything to me," he said coldly. "But now, you don't even exist." Maya sobbed, but Aaron had already turned his back. He walked out without looking back. Reckoning and regret. He didn't need to look long for Marcus. He found him as he always did, slumped at a bar table, the smell of alcohol soaked into his wrinkled clothes. This time, there were no words. Aaron walked through the room with firm steps, ignoring the curious glances around him. Marcus raised his head, his eyes still unfocused, and he didn't even have time to react. Aaron's fist hit his face with force. Marcus staggered back, falling onto a chair. The impact made the glasses on the table shake. The bar went silent. He ran a hand over his mouth, spitting out a trickle of blood. He looked at Aaron and let out a bitter laugh. "I deserved that." Aaron was breathing heavily. "You destroyed your own sister." Marcus looked down, ashamed. "I was in debt. Maya paid me to help her." Aaron clenched his fists again, but something inside him stopped him from continuing. Marcus wasn't worth it. None of this would change the past. He took a step back, the adrenaline beginning to dissipate, but the weight inside him only grew. Because now, he knew the truth. But did it change anything? The damage was already done. The time he had lost with Vivian and his son would never come back. All that was left now was to try to fix what could still be saved. Aaron drove aimlessly, his hands clenched on the steering wheel, his chest heaving as if he couldn't get enough air inside the car. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat, a dull drumbeat marking the rhythm of the anguish spreading through his body. The bitter taste of the truth burned his tongue. Everything he thought he knew was falling apart, the foundations of hatred and pain crumbling under the weight of an irreversible mistake. What consumed him most was the memory of Vivian in the square, holding her son's hand, protecting him as if he were the only world she needed. She didn't need Aaron, and that tore him apart more than any punch he had ever received. When he finally parked in front of Vivian's building, he realized his hands were shaking. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, but the tension in his body wouldn't subside. He got out of the car, feeling the weight of each step as he crossed the sidewalk to the building's door. His heart hammered against his ribs, a mix of anxiety and desperation coursing through his veins. He needed to see her. He needed to talk to her. He needed to tell her the truth. He went up the stairs 2 at a time, feeling cold sweat run down the back of his neck. When he stopped in front of the door, he hesitated for a second, but he couldn't turn back. He clenched his fists and knocked hard. The seconds dragged on like an eternity. Then, the sound of the lock turning cut the silence, and the door opened. Vivian appeared in front of him, wearing a loose t-shirt and sweatpants, her hair falling in waves over her shoulders. Her face was tired, her eyes heavy with deep shadows, as if she had already fought too many battles that night. When she saw him, her body tensed, and her fingers dug into the wood of the door, as if she were preparing to defend herself from something she had already expected. Aaron swallowed. "I know the truth." Vivian's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes darkened. "What truth?" He took a deep breath, the words coming out almost in a whisper. "That boy, he's my son, isn't he?" The silence that followed was more deafening than any answer she could have given. Vivian blinked several times, as if she was trying to process the question, but then her lips curled into a bitter laugh. She shook her head slowly, her eyes misty with contained fury. "You don't have that right," she said, her voice low and trembling. Aaron felt a pang in his chest. "Vivian, please, please." She let out an exasperated sigh, crossing her arms. "Now you want to talk about what's fair, Aaron? After 4 years?" The pain in her voice was a direct hit. He opened his mouth to respond, but she didn't give him a chance. "The day I found out I was pregnant, you disappeared, without a word." The floor seemed to sink beneath his feet. "Vivian, no, you're going to listen to me now." She took a step forward, and her eyes were red, shining with raw emotion. "You just disappeared, Aaron, as if I meant nothing, as if we meant nothing." He tried to defend himself, but the words were stuck. "All those years," she continued, her voice breaking with pain. "No calls, no messages, no sign that you even thought about me. And now, all of a sudden, you show up and you want answers." Aaron's chest hurt, as if someone was tearing him apart from the inside. "I didn't know." She let out a bitter laugh. "Didn't know? You never wanted to know." The words were like a knife stabbing into his chest. He knew she was right. He knew he had run away without looking back, without even considering that there could be another side to the story. "I was an idiot," he admitted, his voice broken. "I should have talked to you. I should have listened to you." She took a deep breath, squeezing her eyes shut for a moment before looking at him again. "But you didn't. You didn't want to listen to me. Aaron, you just erased me from your life." A heavy silence fell between them. Aaron wanted to find a way to fix all of this, but he knew that apologies weren't enough. Vivian bit her lip, hesitating, and when she spoke again, her voice was lower, almost a whisper. "Do you know what it's like to wake up every morning and wonder how you're going to raise a child alone? How you're going to explain to him that his father never wanted to know him?" He closed his eyes for a second, feeling a suffocating pain pierce his chest. "I never wanted to." "But that's what you did," she interrupted, her voice loaded with frustration. "You forced me to move on alone. You made me hate you." Those words were a punch to the gut. He felt his knees give way, as if he were being crushed by the weight of his own guilt. Vivian crossed her arms, looking away. "And now you come back thinking you can just assume that role, that you can be the father he never had?" Aaron ran his hands over his face, exhausted. "I don't know, but I want to try." She laughed again, but this time there was something broken in the sound. "You lost your chance." He felt his chest tighten. "I know I have no right to ask for anything, but nothing, Aaron. You made your decision. I made mine." His breathing became irregular. "Vivian." She raised her hand, interrupting anything he was about to say. "I don't know if I can let you be his father." The silence that followed was devastating. Aaron felt his world spin. Vivian blinked quickly, pushing back any tears that threatened to fall, and took a deep breath before straightening her shoulders. "Go, Aaron!" He opened his mouth, but there was nothing more to say. His feet seemed glued to the ground, his heart hammering against his ribs. But he knew. He knew that no matter how much it hurt, this wasn't a decision for him to make. With a lump in his throat, he nodded slowly, took a step back, and, without another word, he turned and left. This time, Vivian was the one who watched him go. A chance to rebuild, Vivian remained there, standing in front of the closed door, unable to move. The sound of Aaron's footsteps fading down the hall slowly died out, but the pressure in her chest was still overwhelming. She swallowed, blinking quickly to push back the stinging in her eyes. But the truth was that something inside her had already broken again. Her legs felt weak. The air seemed too heavy, suffocating. She reached out her hand to the doorknob, as if for a second her mind considered opening that door and calling him back. But reason was stronger. Her fingers closed around empty air, trembling, and she let out a long sigh before taking a step back. Her fingerprints still marked by the pressure against the wood, Vivian turned and walked into the house, her steps unsteady. She felt her heart hammer against her chest in a way that made her ears ring, but she refused to give in. When she finally reached the sofa, she collapsed onto it, holding her face in her hands. She didn't want to cry. She had already cried too much, but there was something cruel about reliving that pain, as if every word spoken that night had ripped out the wounds that had taken years to heal with her own nails. What hurt the most wasn't the anger, not even the resentment. It was the suffocating feeling that, no matter how much she tried, Aaron still had a space inside her that she couldn't erase. The small touch on her arm brought her back to reality. She quickly raised her head, wiping her face with the back of her hands before turning. The boy was watching her with those deep brown eyes, so similar to Aaron's, his expression heavy with sleepiness and curiosity. "Mommy?" Vivian's chest tightened. "What's wrong, honey?" Her voice came out low and trembling. The boy tilted his head to the side, watching her intently. "Are you sad?" She forced a smile, but even to a child, the lie was transparent. "I'm just tired, sweetheart." He looked at her for a few more seconds, as if trying to understand something much bigger than he could comprehend. Then he simply came closer and hugged her waist, resting his face on her chest. Vivian closed her eyes tightly, feeling the tears well up again. Her son, her boy, the only reason she had stayed strong all those years. She ran her fingers through the boy's soft hair, stroking it in silence. It was then that her friend's voice, Betty, echoed in her mind. "Maybe you should let Aaron get close to your son." Her chest immediately contracted. What if he leaves again? The silence that followed that memory was the same one her friend had given her, because deep down, there was no answer. Time passed without her noticing. The boy fell asleep, leaning on her chest, and she remained there, motionless, just listening to his breathing, feeling his small, innocent heart beating slowly. What if Aaron didn't leave this time? What if he was really sorry? The doubt slithered into her mind like a poison. She looked toward the window, where the city glowed from outside. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to admit something she had been suffocating inside her since the moment she saw Aaron in that square. She still loved him, and that was what she was most terrified of. Vivian spent the rest of the night awake, lying in bed, unable to sleep. The weight of what she felt consumed her from the inside out. Admitting to herself that she still loved Aaron was like opening a wound she had been trying to heal for years. She would close her eyes and see his face, his eyes heavy with regret, the way his voice trembled as he asked for forgiveness. And as much as she wanted to hate him, as much as she tried to hold on to the pain like a shield, the truth was that a part of her wanted to believe him. But what if she was wrong? What if he left again? She couldn't let her son go through that. A quiet persistence. The first few days after that night were a test of endurance. Aaron didn't come looking for her again, and for a moment Vivian thought that maybe he had gotten the message. But then, the next morning, when she took her son to school, she saw a car parked discreetly across the street. He didn't approach, didn't try to force a conversation. He just stayed there, watching from a distance. And that continued to happen. Aaron was always close by, but he never crossed the boundaries she had set. In the following days, Vivian realized that he was trying, silently, to make himself present. She saw him a few times talking to the school principal, as if he were finding out about the boy's routine. One day, upon picking the boy up from daycare, she was surprised by the teacher, who mentioned that the boy's father had stopped by and asked how he could help more with the adjustment. Aaron was trying, and she didn't know what to do with that. But it was the first time the boy got sick that Vivian saw the true impact of the change in him. The fever came in the middle of the night. The boy was tossing and turning in bed, his body hot and trembling, his breathing heavy. Vivian was already used to handling this alone. She prepared the medicine, wetting a cloth to put on his forehead, trying to calm him as she whispered comforting words. But deep down, she also felt fragile. In the middle of that silent night, a knock on the door made her jump. Her first thought was that it might be the neighbor, but when she opened it, she found Aaron there. He looked nervous, his eyes tired, as if he hadn't slept. "I heard he's sick," he said, hesitantly, holding a bag with medicine and some fruits. "Do you need help?" Vivian was speechless for a moment. He didn't ask if he could come in. He didn't demand anything. He simply offered his help. She could have rejected him. She could have said that everything was under control. But for the first time, something inside her hesitated. She took a step back, letting him pass. Aaron didn't talk much that night. He just sat by the boy's bed, watching him sleep, and stayed there, as if his simple presence were enough. Vivian watched him from a distance, her heart restless. When, at a certain moment, Aaron touched the boy's forehead gently, pushing back the damp hair, she felt something crumble inside her. He was trying, and she was starting to see it. The following days brought small changes that Vivian tried to ignore, but that were impossible not to notice. Aaron didn't ask for anything. He didn't insist on difficult conversations. He simply showed, through subtle gestures, that he was there. When Vivian came home late from work, she sometimes found a hot tea in the kitchen, as if someone knew she would need it. The boy began to tell her the stories Aaron read to him when they spent time together, about the games they played, about the shows they now watched together. Vivian began to wonder when, exactly, that empty space began to be filled by Aaron. And then, one night, it happened. She was in the kitchen, making herself some tea after a long day, when she felt his presence behind her. It wasn't invasive. It wasn't suffocating. It was just there. She turned slowly and unintentionally. Their bodies brushed against each other. It was an instant, a quick, almost insignificant touch. But the warmth of his arm against hers was enough to make her catch her breath. Time stopped. Aaron's eyes met hers, and there was something there that Vivian hadn't seen in years. A charged silence, an invisible weight, something they both felt, but neither dared to name. Her heart pounded loudly in her chest. She pulled away quickly, as if she had touched fire. Aaron noticed, but he didn't say anything. He just watched. And Vivian knew that, sooner rather than later, she could no longer ignore what was happening. A shift in trust. The rain beat against the windows when Vivian opened her front door that night. Exhaustion weighed on her shoulders like an anchor, and all she wanted was a hot bath and silence. But as she closed the door behind her, she realized the house wasn't in its usual quiet state. On the contrary, A child's laughter echoed from the living room, a light, carefree sound, followed by a deep voice that was trying, without much success, to sound funny. Vivian frowned and left her shoes in the corner of the hallway, walking slowly toward the living room. And then she saw it. Aaron was sitting on the floor with the boy between his legs, holding 2 action figures and mimicking exaggerated voices. The boy was laughing, his eyes shining with joy, completely engrossed in the game. Aaron made faces, dramatized every phrase, and with each clumsy gesture, the boy's laughter exploded even louder. Vivian stood there, unseen, just watching. Something inside her softened. She didn't remember the last time she saw her son so happy. She didn't remember a time when he had felt so complete. And suddenly, a thought she had always avoided hit her full force. What if Aaron had never left? The scene in front of her seemed like an alternate version of the life they could have had. One in which Aaron never disappeared, where he was present from the first cry, from the first steps, where her son never had to ask why he didn't have a father like the other kids at school. She squeezed her arms against her body, feeling a coldness that didn't come from the rain outside. Aaron sensed her presence first. He looked up, and for an instant, his eyes met hers. There was no surprise there, no guilt, just something deep and serene, as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "You've really changed," she said, without realizing she had spoken aloud. Aaron held her gaze for longer than he should have, and then he smiled. "It took too long, didn't it?" Vivian looked away, her breathing irregular. "Maybe, but I'm seeing your effort." It was all she managed to say before leaving, without looking at him again. Later that night, after putting the boy to bed, she found Aaron in the kitchen, organizing some papers that were scattered on the table. Vivian hesitated at the door, watching him. The image of him there in the heart of the house seemed as natural as it was painful, as if it were a scene that should have existed much earlier, but that was only now taking shape. He looked up when he felt her presence. "Need help with this?" She took a deep breath, not knowing the exact reason, but instead of rejecting him, she simply nodded. Aaron pulled up a chair and began to organize the papers next to her. The silence that settled between them was no longer filled with resentment or pain. It was a new silence, a silence where the other's presence no longer felt uncomfortable. At one point, their shoulders touched lightly. Vivian felt a shiver run down her back. Her body reacted before her mind. She turned her face without meaning to, and Aaron's eyes were there, fixed on her, deep. Time seemed to slow down. The air became heavier. There was something between them, something unspoken, something that was growing in the space that separated them. Vivian swallowed and looked away first. She wasn't ready yet, but Aaron noticed, and he knew that little by little, the barriers were beginning to crumble. The following days brought subtle, almost imperceptible changes, but they were there, growing between them. Vivian still tried to convince herself that she wasn't giving in, that her resistance was still intact, but the details didn't lie. The way Aaron's eyes discreetly followed her when he thought she wasn't looking. The way he laughed with the boy, a sound so familiar that it made something inside her squirm. The naturalness with which he adapted to their routine, without invading, without demanding. Simply existing there, in the space that was once his, and that, in some way, seemed to be reclaiming it again. That afternoon, while she was organizing some boxes in the living room closet, Vivian felt his presence approaching. Aaron was by her side before she could refuse his help, taking one of the boxes and holding it steady. The touch was an accident, a slip, a brief instant where their fingers met. but the effect was immediate. A shiver ran down her skin, and she froze in that moment. He noticed it too. For a brief second, Aaron didn't let go of her hand. The warmth of his skin burned against hers, familiar, yet unknown after so long. Vivian held her breath, and when she finally pulled away, it was so abrupt that she almost dropped the box on the floor. "Thanks," she said too quickly, avoiding looking at him. Aaron didn't press. He just nodded, but his eyes remained on her for a moment longer than necessary. That night, after the boy was asleep, Vivian went out onto the balcony for air. The house seemed too small to contain the thoughts swirling inside her, the unease that was growing more and more. The cold night wind blew against her face, and she closed her eyes for an instant, trying to find a space of calm within herself. It was then that she heard footsteps behind her. Aaron stopped beside her, not saying anything at first. He just stood there, his hands in his pockets, looking at the sky in the same way she was. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was a different kind of silence, loaded with unspoken meanings. "I still love you, you know." His voice cut through the air so unexpectedly that Vivian felt her heart stop for a second. She turned slowly, but found no hesitation in his eyes. Just the truth. Her chest tightened. "Aaron?" She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to feel. He looked down for a moment, then looked at her again, this time with something firmer in his voice. "I know you can't trust me. I know I destroyed this, but I'll keep proving I'm sorry, for as long as it takes." Her heart pounded against her ribs. He didn't insist on an answer. He just left his words there, suspended between the two of them, and went back into the house. In the following days, Vivian tried not to think about it. She tried to ignore how her breathing would shorten every time he was near, how her gaze insisted on finding him even when she didn't want to. But the truth was that something inside her had already given in. The following week, she was the one who invited him to dinner. Aaron hesitated for a second when she made the invitation, as if he didn't know if he had heard right. But he accepted, and that night he was there, sitting at the table, sharing a meal with her and the boy, as if that were the future they should have had from the beginning. At the time of parting, they stood at the door for longer than necessary. The boy was already asleep, and the house was silent. Aaron's eyes found hers, and Vivian knew. She knew the instant he let his gaze drop to her lips, the moment she felt her own body react before her mind. She leaned in first. She didn't think. She didn't analyze. She simply gave in. The kiss came like a jolt, a reunion, a whirlwind of emotions that had been swallowed and repressed for too long. The taste was of longing, of pain, of desire. Aaron hugged her waist, pulling her toward him, and Vivian felt her heart beat again, as if it were waking up after a long winter, as if, for the first time in years, she was finally allowing herself to feel. A new beginning. The kiss was like a silent earthquake, shaking everything Vivian thought she had under control. There were no more barriers, no more excuses, just the moment that enveloped them, burning like a hot ember after being extinguished for so long. Aaron held her waist firmly, but without rushing, as if he feared that any sudden movement would make her pull back. But she didn't pull back. Her body reacted before her mind. Her hand slid up his chest, her fingers clutching the fabric of his shirt, as if she needed an anchor. The taste was familiar, yet different. The same Aaron from before, but now marked by time, by pain, by the guilt he carried like a constant shadow. When they finally broke apart, Aaron kept his eyes closed for an instant, as if he wanted to prolong that moment. Vivian, on the other hand, opened her eyes first. Her chest rose and fell irregularly, her thoughts jumbled, impossible to organize. she began, but the words were lost in the air. Aaron opened his eyes, the intense brown ones meeting hers with a depth that made her stomach churn. He didn't say anything. He just waited. He waited for her to make her decision, for her to define the next steps. And that's when Vivian realized. He wasn't going to force her into anything anymore. He wasn't going to try to convince her with words or demand something she wasn't ready to give. Aaron was no longer the man who had once abandoned her. She took a deep breath, took a step back, without completely letting go of his hand. "I need time." Her voice came out softer than she expected. Aaron nodded, without hesitation. "As long as you need." The days that came after were different. There was no more suffocating tension between them, no need to prove something all the time. Aaron was still present, but now no longer as a weight from the past. He was there because he wanted to be, because he chose to stay. For the first time, Vivian realized how much her son also felt that change. The boy smiled more. He talked more. He listened to bedtime stories and knew that the next day his father would still be close. It was on a sunny afternoon at the park, when everything finally seemed to click into place. The boy ran ahead, laughing as he played at jumping on the chalk squares drawn on the ground. Aaron was by her side, his hands in his pockets, his gaze lost in the scene in front of him. "I'm still afraid," Vivian confessed suddenly. Aaron turned to her, but didn't interrupt. She sighed, crossing her arms. "Afraid of believing and being disappointed again. Afraid that my son will get attached to you, and one day you'll decide it's no longer worth it." Aaron took a step forward, hesitant, but determined. "I will never run away again." His voice carried an undeniable weight. He held out his hand, his fingers slightly open, waiting for her to make her decision. Vivian looked at that hand, at the man in front of her. She thought about the past, about the pain. But she also thought about the present, about the effort, about the change. Then, for the first time in years, she chose to trust. Her smile was small, almost hesitant, but genuine, as she intertwined her fingers with his. "Then let's build this opportunity together." Aaron squeezed her hand, and for the first time, Vivian felt the weight on her shoulders finally begin to disappear. They didn't have a happy ending, but they had a new beginning. Interactive elements prompting question. What does a new beginning mean for Aaron, Vivian, and their son? Discussion. Is it possible for a relationship and a family to truly heal after such a deep betrayal? Call to action. Share your thoughts on whether Aaron's efforts were enough to earn back Vivian's trust. Question for the reader. Would you have forgiven Aaron in Vivian's place?